We don't think we can, so we don't. We think we're not good enough, so we hold back. And if we listen to doubt when that happens, it can take us out.
God says, hey, I'm going to answer your prayer by not meeting your request. Instead, he says, my grace is sufficient for you.
God, you've graced me for what I'm called to do. You are with me. You're going to help me walk through what I got to walk through and be who I got to be.
I think God, he puts a thorn in our flesh because it prevents the predator of pride from stepping in. And anytime we think that we've got it on our own, independent, it's when we stop being dependent on him.
But I started to realize, why did I write a book on doubt if I have the gift of faith? It must be that God gave me a gift in an area that he knew I would have lack.
Hey, it's Rich, and you're listening to the Mature Me podcast, weekly content devoted to all things life, leadership, culture, and faith. Thank you for taking some time to tune in. Make sure you subscribe and follow us on all our social channels so you don't miss a thing. Let's listen to today's episode.
Well, hey everybody, welcome back to a brand new episode of the Mature Me podcast. My name is Rich Wilkerson Jr., and wherever you're at in the world, we're so grateful that you are joining us. Really quick, as we get started today, if you're watching by way of YouTube, go ahead and like, subscribe, share this content. We'd love for you to leave a comment. Love getting your feedback. So cool to watch this channel grow and to hear so many people's stories of what they're learning and what they're enjoying about this podcast. Of course, if you're listening by way of Spotify or Apple, go ahead, leave a review. We're so happy that you're here. This is the podcast that we talk not just about getting old, but actually about getting better, maturing. And today we have a wonderful guest on, someone I've known for many, many years. In fact, he is a neighbor. We are in each other's backyard. I'm down in Dade County and he's up in the West Palm Beach area. He pastors one of the largest churches in America. But more importantly than that, he is a husband, he is a father, and he's got a brand new book out that I'm really excited about. In fact, we're gonna talk a lot about it today. It's called Don't Let Doubt Take You Out. I am talking about none other than the one and the only Pastor Todd Mullins, everybody.
Hey, Rich.
The clap machine
Good
goes
to
right
be
there.
with you.
The clap machine happens.
Yeah, well, put it on there, man. We love you guys
West
so
Palm
much.
Beach in the house.
Yeah.
You ever
Neighbors.
see James Patterson up there?
No, never.
You know the name James Patterson?
Yeah.
I just feel
We
like
got some people up there, though. You know, around the Palm Beach area.
Yep.
Like when I get over and I go slumming over on the island, man, you can see some people.
whenever I read a James Patterson novel, I think about you, but I'm also going, man, maybe I should live in West Palm Beach. There's so much mystery taking place up there.
Sylvester Stallone is living there now, and he's
Really?
hanging out like the restaurants and ice cream shops, and he's been spotted. He's the nicest guy.
You know what my favorite place in Palm Beach is RH. Is it RH Kitchen, Pilar, that we like? Yeah,
Restoration Harbor upstairs on that balcony. Yeah,
you know,
beautiful.
I've been to Maine. I've been up and down Boston. I've been all over the place. But I'm telling you what, the lobster roll at the RH Kitchen.
It is real.
That's
it is
fantastic.
amazing. Yeah, where do they get that?
It's special. Do you ever just, get a lot of those and just give them out to the congregants?
Yeah, let's do that. We'll try that this Sunday. Maybe they'll come to church.
Man, I'm so happy that you're here. I'm trying to think when we first met, maybe 15 years ago.
15 years ago. So, yeah.
It's been a journey, but you and I always joke that we end up seeing each other not in South Florida.
No, it was usually somewhere around the conference in Europe or Colorado. And we're like, wait a minute, we're just an hour apart. Why would we have to go to Colorado to hang out? So,
and our favorite thing is always like, let's get lunch. We have to get lunch.
We still will.
And we will. And what's honestly funny is that, we just hit 18 years of marriage, but obviously when you've been married that long, I've got some people that maybe I like guys, and then Dawn, she's got some girls that she likes, and that's cool. But it's rare when you meet, the
Couples.
guy likes the, yes.
Yeah, I know,
and
right?
we actually love
like each other a lot.
y'all. And I don't know why we don't figure out a way, but
We'll figure it out.
we're going to do it. And so here it is today, the conversation that we've been wanting to have personally,
Yeah.
but instead we're going, it's 2025.
Let's invite everybody.
Let's just invite a
Come
bunch
on
of
in.
people into
Yeah,
a room
yeah.
and let people come into the cameras. But I'm so excited that you're here. And for me, you're one of my spiritual heroes. That you're down here in South Florida, but I think in many ways, while our stories are different, there's some similarities. We're both pastors' kids. We're both, in many ways, have taken over our father's work, still in great relation with our dads.
Yes.
Let's tell a little bit about your story. I want to talk about the book, and there's a lot of things I want to chat with you about. Christ Fellowship, just one of the leading churches. I'm a church junkie. I like building church. I know that you do. And so there's a lot of things I want to ask you about. But how did you get into ministry? Yeah. Tell me a little bit about, did you always know you're going to be in ministry, being a pastor's kid? Give us some of the background.
No, I didn't want to be a pastor. Not that I didn't like pastors. I love pastors, but I didn't want to be, I wanted to be a doctor. And we moved down to Florida. We had lived here when I was real young, moved away, came back right before I was starting middle school. And my dad, through some connections he had, my dad was a football coach. He coached on the high school level. They would win the state titles here in Florida. Then we went up and he coached on the college level up north. And then we moved back down here to South Florida. And there were some men that helped start a very elite private school, and they said, "Hey, Tom, if you help coach football, then Todd can get a free scholarship to this prep school." And it was a very elite kind of thing. And I remember we moved down from Kentucky back down to Palm Beach County, and I was unaware that people lived like they lived in some of the places they lived in, and I did not know what I had stepped into. It was like kids were getting dropped off in stretch limousines. They had nannies and butlers bringing them hot lunches to school, and I'm like, what is going on? And felt so out of place. But I decided in this school I was going to go be a doctor. And it was right before my senior year. I felt the call of God to step into ministry. And my parents were they were volunteering in the church. We grew up loving the church, man, serving. I watched my parents just serve pastors and serve the church and volunteer. And they just put in me a great love for God and his people at a very young age. So I actually decided to be a pastor before my parents started Christ Fellowship. So I like to say that my dad actually followed me into ministry instead of me. I don't think that's true, but because they actually set the pace for ministry, because ministry isn't a paycheck, it's not a platform. They were serving and building church for decades. But so I decided to go off and study theology and Bible, and then came back. And as I started that's when the church started. So when I came back, I just jumped on team and did everything. Like I was the janitor, I was the secretary, the youth guy, the worship guy, whatever, and you're building church, it's whatever needs to be done to build church, and just grew up with the church.
What year did Christ Fellowship begin?
It started in 1984.
That's the year I was born.
Yeah.
And its early days began with...
real small. Like it started in my parents' living room, 20 people, Bible study.
Because even planning a church in 84 is a pretty rare thing.
Right. And there was no ARC and all those teams out there to help you do it. You just did what you thought to do. And so, we started meeting in a little school cafetorium, which isn't really a real word, cafetorium. It was part cafeteria, part auditorium.
I've been in
like
one.
Sour milk. I mean, that's what
I
it felt
think
like.
we've used it. Yeah. It's got a stage over there.
Yeah, in the corner, and we'll make it work.
The tables.
Yeah. So we were small for a long time. My dad, coach. He's like, let's go conquer the hill. And if there's no hill to conquer, let's build a hill, and then we'll charge the hill. And we were small for a long time. And he even feels like that was just, God saying, hey, I want to take all of the self drive out of you and just depend on me, trust me. He calls it the backside of the mountain for him, just getting rid of the self will to trust the will of God. And then pretty soon the church started growing, got into a barn, turned the barn into a church, outgrew that, bought a cow field. We like barns and cow fields, and
It really is very, very interesting, because today Christ Fellowship is in 14 different locations.
Yeah.
And tens of thousands of people show up. And I think any story of something really big and large, when you just sort of, show up, if we just show up to Christ Fellowship today, it's like, oh man, this was always here. But nothing just happens.
No.
Everything starts in the seed.
So you come, when I go speak for people, like, oh, your church has got so many people and so many campuses. And I'm like, that's not the story. The story was being faithful with the 60 or 70 people for 7 years, being faithful with just a few. I think, why would God trust us with more if he can't trust us with what we've got, right? I mean, why, when I was a youth pastor and I had 10 kids in my youth group, right? Why would he trust me with 110 if I wasn't going to pastor those 10 and love those 10 and care for those 10 really well? And I think just, when you think about it, much is just made up of a lot of small things. And if you're not faithful, Jesus said, with the small things, why would I give you more to work with? And so, man, I just want to be faithful with whatever the small thing is at God's. It's big, right? It's big.
I just did a message recently. We were at together. This is big.
This is big.
And just anything small, that if you believe in it and God told you to do it, you just declare it. This is big. Right. Your dad is a larger than life personality.
Yes.
And did you grow up, you're an only child?
No, I have a sister that's younger than me.
Okay, so you have a sister, so it's the two of you. How are you like your dad, and how are you different from your dad?
Yeah. I think I have become more like my dad the older I've gotten. You know, when I started, probably when I was younger, I was probably a little bit more like my mom. She's got a little bit more of a tender nature. And my dad's like, we're just, he's football coach, hunter, all that kind of, we got to go run it. And I'm like, okay. You know,
He genuinely is like that.
I was trying to
like,
keep up with him. You know, I think there was a lot of intimidation I had when I was stepping in to, at first I thought I had to fill his shoes. And I'm thinking, how can I fill this great legend? How do I fill his shoes? He's got big shoes to fill. And he and God, both my spiritual father and my heavenly father, both told me, no, Todd, you don't got to fill anybody's shoes except your own. You got to be who God's called you to be. You got to do what you've called to do. But as I've gotten older, I think I have gotten a lot more like him. He's very adventuresome, man, big vision. And when I stepped into these shoes, I thought, man, I don't even know how to get a vision from God for the church, because I've just been helping fulfill his vision. But when you spend that time, alone with God in prayer, and God will give you a clear word for that. So I just had to get comfortable in my own skin and leading the church the way God had equipped me to do it.
Yeah, I'm a junior, so Rich Wilkerson, meaning I'm named after my father. And my dad, growing up for me was, and still is, my hero. I'm 40 now, and so I'm an adult, obviously, and I feel like I'm running my own race. But I certainly remember when I was younger, looking up to my dad and seeing this larger than life personality and going, oh, I could never do that, or I could never compare to that. And I don't know when it was, but it was probably early on. Maybe it was just because I had such a good encourager of a father, but I don't think like in my 20s, I was feeling like I was in my dad's shadow. I felt very much, pushed on by him to go be who I'm called to be. But I do know that there's a lot of people out there who have a strong father, who have a big personality dad, and sometimes they can kind of get trapped in that shadow, and that sort of leads to a life of insecurity, a life of feeling sort of stuck, never stepping out. What were some things maybe that you can think back on in your own story, or even with your father, that allowed you to step out and be fully you? Yeah,
that's a great question. My dad always encouraged that. I think he knew I wasn't exactly like him. Like he like I said, loves to hunt. Well, I can go hunting, but it's not like I've got to hunt, right? And he loves sports, played sports. He made me play sports when I was in Pee Wee League and had to play everything. And I enjoyed it, but I didn't like, oh my gosh, I want to become a football coach. So pretty soon he had to figure out, Todd's wired a little differently. And what I love about it is, even though he was bigger than life, he just let me live my life and encouraged me to, Todd, be who you're called to be, do what you're called to do. And I think when you get the affirmation from your father, even if he's, you're different than him, man, it does something to it releases something inside of you that just allows you to, okay, I'm going to go be who I'm called to be. And never once, I can't think back, Rich, one time when I ever felt like like my dad was disappointed in me because I wasn't living up to something. I mean, there were things probably that he was disappointed in, but he didn't let that wasn't the overriding, message that he was sending me. He was always finding ways to kind of call me up and encourage me to be who I was called to be and to be better than I was. And I think I've taken that with me into my life with my son, is like, how do I speak words that are going to encourage him, knowing that every word matters? I think sometimes as dads, we don't realize, man, every word counts, right? We feel it. And so, or the kids feel it. I felt it as a kid. And so I think just being really conscientious of that as a father, not that it restricts me, but I have a filter that I put on before I'm talking to my son. And then of course now I've got sons in the gospel, sons in the church that are like sons. And I learned when I stepped into lead. Before I was kind of like, I was my dad's son. So I was just the older brother in the relationship. And so older brothers, we can kind of harass each other and joke with each other and, little things. And man, when I stepped up to be the senior pastor, I kept acting like I was the older brother. And I remember when guys were looking at me that we had just joked about some stuff, some not bad stuff, but just kind of teasing each other. And all of a sudden my words, I felt like were heavier than what they had been before. And I'm like, what is going on? Why are they acting so? And then it hit me that I had stepped into this role as like more of a spiritual leader, dad role. And those words were a little bit weightier. And I realized I've got to be a little more careful. I wanted the relationship of the brother to brother. I didn't want I didn't want to have to be the spiritual dad thing. I just wanted to be their brother, but I realized this new role I was in required something new of me in my relationship with them. And just so
it's really interesting and I think it's full of insight. When I was working with my dad, I worked with my dad in Miami Gardens, North Miami for 8 years. And same thing, I went through all the ranks of different roles and overseeing kids, and I would park cars and I would run the lights and I'd build a sound team and build a chair team, whatever team needed to happen, I was doing it. But sort of eventually towards the end there, I was in that kind of executive pastor role where these other kind of spaces are reporting to me. But yeah, I remember I was brothers with all these guys on team. And as I was stepping out to start VU Church, the word that came to me was, don't ask anybody to go. And anybody who says that they want to go, that you feel like they shouldn't be a part of this, you should tell them that, which was sort of drastic and dramatic language. But there was a shift taking place, which was, if you are going to come over into this other space, you can't just see me as a brother. You're going to have to actually see me as the leader. And I think another big shift that's happened in my life is having my own kids. Like, you just recognize the voice and the weight of a father.
Yeah.
And I think we live in a funny time right now where there's lots of church critics and lots of people telling pastors how they should do their job or how they can do better at their job. Or if you preach a message, this person's celebrating it, this person's correcting it. And one of the frameworks that's really, really helped me is like, I don't want to talk to my church in a way that I wouldn't talk to my own child.
That's great.
So if we're going to correct something, if we're going to speak about a subject, I want to use the same tone.
Yeah.
I want my heart to be in the same place that I'm talking to my son.
That's great.
Wyatt. I was teaching recently to some pastors, and my assignment was teach on culture. And so my topic was culture rules. And it's sort of the entendre that, culture really rules, your environment, your organization, but also culture rules. Remember O'Doyle rules from Billy Madison?
Yeah.
But in that, we were talking about, I was kind of giving different rules of culture. And one is like, you've got to change confrontations, connotation, which I've heard you and Julie do beautiful talks on. Just leadership is about having awkward conversations. And a father, according to Hebrews, corrects, rebukes. If I don't discipline you, do I love you?
Right.
But then equally as important is that whatever you celebrate gets repeated. And if you think correction's powerful, check out celebration.
Yeah.
Because it's a reinforcement, and the positive is even more powerful. And I said this about my dad. I said, I'm sure there's been some sermons throughout the years that my dad has corrected, but there has never been a sermon that I've ever preached that my father did not celebrate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how I would explain my dad,
is
that his celebration and his cheers and his encouragement always outweighed his rebuke or his correction. The deposits were always greater.
Yeah.
And I think it allowed freedom to be who we're called to be.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting thing to talk about because, as you're stepping in, I think 2011 is when you transitioned to the church. At that time, was there multiple sites in 2011?
Yeah, we had 4 sites, about 11,000 people.
So 11, I mean.
It was big.
This is.
How do I do this?
This is massive.
I started off when there were 60 people, 40 people.
So, hey, Todd, it's 2011. Here's 11,000 people out there. You're now taking over for Coach.
Yeah.
And Doctor, you begin. I mean, obviously, we know the aftermath now today. You've been able to multiply and grow and step into who you are. Give us some give us some terrible, give us some embarrassing. Give me some of your worst moments, 2011 to 2014.
Let's
give some stuff.
Oh my
that was
gosh.
give me some bad sermons.
There were sermons I preached, I thought, nobody should have stayed in the room.
Stop.
They should have got up and left, and I didn't want to come back. I preached on Saturday night. I drove out of the parking lot going, I'm not coming back tomorrow.
This is why I don't do Saturday night services. I can't
know.
go to bed and go do that again. It's enough when I have a bad message at 8:45. I'm like, I got to do this all the way till 6 p.m. tonight.
So Dad had just brought John Maxwell on as one of the teaching team pastors. He and Margaret, all of them moved their family down. as I
As
was
you do.
beginning
John Maxwell on the teaching
to
team.
learn to preach again. Because I've been executive pastor, worship pastor, but I haven't been preaching, especially not in front of adults, for years. So Dad gave me a few lessons, hit me on the backside, and get up there, boy, go. So I'm preaching, and John Maxwell's on the front row. And for some reason, Rich, during this season of time, he wasn't traveling as much, or he wasn't traveling as much on the weekends. And he was always there. And I'm like, why are you here? Right? And then he would be writing notes while I'm preaching, and I'm thinking, what could you possibly be writing down that I'm saying to you? And I was so intimidated. I remember just thinking, I can't do this. And I finally decided I'm going to lean into it. I'm like, okay, John's here. I'm either going to avoid him or I'm going to run to it. So I decided after every time, he would always show up at the first Saturday night service. So I decided I get to preach this like 4 more times. So I'm going to run down to him. I'm going to say, John, teach me. What would I do differently? How would you coach me on this? And he always had something good to say, but he always had 1 or 2 things to help me get better. And I just decided I got one of the best communicators in the world. I'm either going to be intimidated and play the comparison game, or I'm going to run towards it. I'm going to learn from a legend in the room. And so that's helped me. I remember one time I was preaching and Reinhard Bonnke was in the,
oh my gosh.
And I'm preaching, trying to preach. And I see Reinhard, which if you don't know who Reinhard is, one of the greatest evangelists
of all time.
Of all times, like hundreds of thousands of people show up when he would preach in Africa for Jesus.
Africa.
And I'm preaching and I look out, he was like 8 rows back, and I like, that's Reinhard Bonnke. Oh my gosh. Wait, why am I preaching and Reinhard Bonnke is listening to me preach? And all that was going through my head as I was trying to keep some thoughts moving together. And at the end of the service, he walked up and I was praying with someone at the altar, and he waited off to the side. Such a humble man of God he was, right? And he just, at the end of it, he says, I am Reinhard Bonnke. And I'm like, I know who you are. Why are you here? And so they had just moved to the area as well. So as I'm learning to try to preach, I've got Reinhard, my dad, John Maxwell, who knows who else sitting in the congregation. And I'm thinking, I can't do this. And Rich, I remember when I was praying and bringing all of my fears to God in that season, my insecurities, like, I don't think I can do this, God. I don't have what it takes. And I remember when the Lord responded to my cries of insecurity, and it wasn't the response that I expected. I expected and wanted I am with you as I was with your father. I was expecting some kind of like, holy pat on the back, right? And what I got from the Lord was, yeah, you don't have what it takes, and you're not enough. And I remember kind of gasping in that moment of prayer. And then as I listened, the Holy Spirit said, but I am enough. You don't have what it takes, but I have what you need. And instantly I went, oh, so my doubt is actually good for me. My doubt is actually going to keep me dependent and trusting in God. And I think sometimes if we learn to leverage, and that's what I wrote about in the book, if we learn to leverage that self-doubt and that questioning that comes up, it can actually be, the benefit of doubt is that it keeps us dependent. The benefit of doubt is that it keeps us desperate for God. So we're not relying on our own strength. We're not trying to muster up enough, I got this. It's more like, God, I don't got anything unless you come and fill. And so I actually, those first few sermons, they were pretty bad. They were short. I think my first sermon was like 10 minutes. I'm like, that's all I got. What else?
Is there anything practical you can remember, like going down to John Maxwell, that you can remember going, like, he said this thing to me and it really did help me, or it really,
Yes.
like, I really did implement that day?
Well, multiple times. He had to say, it was kind of thick. He had to say it about 4 times. He says, Todd, you have to slow down. You've been thinking these thoughts and preparing this message, and then you get up there and you just go. But we're all just on a journey of trying to follow. So just slow down, take a pause. John is the master of the pause.
Yes.
And so I've tried to implement
I'm John.
Slowing down. I'm John.
I'm your friend.
I'm your friend.
And I love you.
But yeah, slowing down was a big one. And just, man, thinking about with the people. Don't think about yourself. He said, just think about the people. If you think about yourself, you're going to be worried about what they're thinking about you, and is this making sense, and all that. You just think about, what do they need? And when you put yourself in the seat of the people, you're not going to worry.
When I was growing up, my dad, we come from I know you come from a long Baptist family. Rich, we're not Baptist.
It's not Baptist.
I'm kidding. I'm lying on Mature Me. It's a funny joke.
I love Baptists. I'm just not one of them.
What is your background?
It was holiness, Methodist.
I love that.
Wesleyan, whatever.
We're just lying on Mature Me podcast. This is Todd Mullins. He's a Baptist. I'm not. I'm not a Baptist. But we come from, my dad was like, we used to run
Assemblies of God.
they would call them crusades and Assemblies of God. So we first moved to Miami. I remember it was like our first or second Sunday, and back then, it's funny, I'm full circle. This hair, by the way, is a cry for help, if you're wondering. But my hair was bleached when I was 14 years of age here in Miami, and I remember it must have been our first month, maybe it was our first Sunday. And Dad's like, Rich, why don't you come up here and greet the people? It's like, okay, like there's no prep for this.
Yeah.
And somehow, man, I get going, and I give a message.
Did you?
3 Ds. Church, we're going to see God do incredible. We're going to see God do incredible things here in this church. Like, number one, why am I calling the church the church? Like, you're 14.
You're 14.
Shut up.
You don't know
just
anything.
like church. And number one was we're going to see drug addiction decrease. Okay. Like in the church, like, okay, a lot of drugs in this church.
Second, it is Miami, so.
Yeah, you never know. Second D, divorce.
Okay.
You guys, quit getting divorced. I'm 14.
14. You're going to tell somebody.
And then the last one was death. But it wasn't really death. I wanted to talk about murder. And so I had to have the D for the alliteration.
Did you have that planned?
It just came to me. I'm pretty good on the,
You are pretty good on the fly.
It was just like my flow, what I mean? So it's like, quit killing each other, church. Like, once again, I think if these are the 3 issues in your church, you shouldn't go to that church. Like, God bless it. The church is for all people. But if the church you're going to is full of drug addicts and murderers and everyone's getting divorced, you might want to find a healthier body. And I would recommend Christ Fellowship. It's got its roots in the Baptist movement, and they're doing an amazing job. Rich, once again, this is going to get clipped, and I can't do that. There was a funny, clip. I don't know if you ever saw this, and maybe you can remind me of the story. I saw this years ago. It's John Maxwell.
Yes.
You already know what I'm talking about.
I know where you're going.
At Christ Fellowship. And man, he's going after you because it was the mic stand. Explain the clip.
Yeah,
I wish we had it.
We couldn't afford the nice podium stands or something when the church was getting started. We didn't even know they existed. So we had one of those music stands that you can adjust, right?
Yep.
And so the music stand came out for John. Somebody set it, and he put his stuff on it, and it flipped over and everything fell off. So I was on the front row, jumped up
to
help it get it reset. Thought I had done it.
I'm a servant.
I know. I'm there to help him. Just serve John. And got it all reset. It did it again. So now he's, John's like, come on,
Master,
Todd. And he's milking it. And so then I go off stage, get a new one, bring the new music stand out, set that up, take the other one away. He puts the stuff, same thing happens. So it's just like, I think it's got more views on YouTube than all my sermons combined.
I don't know how I saw that clip, but I'm watching John Maxwell. Like, this guy is a master, and it's all at the expense of Todd. It's like, Todd, how are you going to take this church over?
Is this really the best you can do to lead? I'm like, I'm
just trying. I'm so happy you're here, but this is all I can do, man. I think we are talking about this kind of stuff, and I think that big part of your life experience is this idea of facing doubt. Yeah. And I don't know if people would even catch that once again, seeing who you are today. And if you come and see the work that Christ Fellowship's doing beyond it just being a large church, it's the impact that it's making in a city, in the nation, really. So many of us are following you guys and what you guys are doing in cities and seeing transformation take place. But you were kind of speaking to it there for a moment where it's like, I'm stepping into this. These are big shoes to fill. God, give me a big word, but he doesn't encourage us in us.
Yeah.
That's what I've learned.
Right.
When God comes to encourage you, he doesn't encourage you in Todd Mullins' strength or Rich Wilkerson's strength. Mm-hmm. He encourages you in his strength. John the Baptist is in prison. Hey, are you the one to come? Tell John, the lame walk, the deaf hear. It's like, whoa. Like, I'm talking about me,
Yeah.
And it's always back to him. And I'm excited about this book. And I haven't gotten to read all of it, but I was going through it a couple of weeks ago, and just even the chapters alone. And there's so many things that you're sharing about it. But let's talk a little bit about why you wrote this. Yeah. Don't let doubt take you out. I want to encourage people to get this book, but I think this is more than just a message. In many ways, I feel like it's a life message.
It is a life message. And when I realized, I thought that I was the only one feeling some of the feelings that I was feeling, doubting myself, not thinking I could. And I grew up in a home like yours, man, it's full of affirmation, full of, man, Todd, you can do anything. I was pretty good at school, had friends, influenced the youth group. I was kind of the youth president for our state denomination that wasn't Baptist. And
it's the dumbest joke. I repent. I'm sorry.
I on the outside, you wouldn't have thought I dealt with self-doubt. But there were things that happened to me when I was a kid, not from home, but from school, and things that were said over me that I just carried with me my whole life. And it led, moments of uncertainty can lead to lifelong insecurity if we're not careful to deal with those situations, things that happen to us. And so I carried that with me in through middle school, high school, and doubt has this way of plaguing. We see people that are successful, we see people that are killing it, we see people that are like, man, confident, and we think they don't struggle with the things we struggle with. We think they're somehow exempt from dealing with insecurities and doubt. But everybody I've met, as a pastor, I've got to counsel some wildly successful people in the area of sports, top of their game. Like if I said their name, you would know who they are. Top of industry, built big businesses. But man, in their life, they still struggle with, am I good enough as a father? I don't think I'm doing right for my marriage. I don't know that I'm good enough. I don't know that I'm living up to the expectations that are put on me. And so I realized that, man, all of us deal with self-doubt at some stage. We don't think we can, so we don't. We think we're not good enough, so we hold back. And if we listen to doubt when that happens, it can take us out. Like for me, it was trying to take me out of stepping up and leading the church, because I'm like, I can't do this. I can't be my dad. I can't preach in front of John Maxwell. I don't know if I can take this on. But if we learn to leverage doubt when it sticks its ugly head up, and we actually use it as an indicator light that there's something we got to pay attention to. It's like a warning light on the dashboard of your car that says something's overheating. If you don't pay attention to it, you're going to end up on the side of the road. But if you actually pay attention to it, you can actually deal with it before it takes you out. And so on self-doubt, it was, man, this sense of, I've got to depend on God, not on Todd. I got to depend on what God can give me. If what he's calling me to is supernatural, then I need some supernatural strength in order to do that. And so I talk about that a lot in the book, about just where this self-doubt comes from and how do we overcome it? How do we take those feelings of insecurity that we all have, uncertainty at some time? How do we flip that on its head to actually cause us to be dependent on God for strength? And when we're dependent on God, we walk through life with a sense of Godfidence, not a confidence in me, but a confidence in God, what he can do, who he is, that the truest thing about me is what God says about me. The truest thing about you is not what some kid said about you in third grade. It's not what some ex said about you. The truest thing about you is what God said about you. And if we can recenter on that, it flips doubt on its head and it builds confidence.
I know. It's annoying when you're in the middle of a conversation and someone interrupts like this, but I wouldn't do it unless it was really, really important. Listen, this is an ad-free podcast. However, we do tell you about some of the great things that we are doing right here on the ground in Miami, Florida. And I want to speak to you about something that really means a lot to me, and that is VooCon 2025. Are you looking to grow? Do you want to build community? Do you want to strengthen your faith? Something tells me the answer is yes. That's why you're watching Mature Me. Well, I want to invite you to Miami, Florida, June 19th through the 21st for VooCon 2025. Listen to me. This is going to be our greatest year yet. Our theme this year is Dying to Be Different. It's 3 incredible days in the Watsco Arena. You've never, ever experienced the power of God until you've got into an arena with 7,000 other people lifting up one name. The entire convention is all about encountering God, equipping the church, and empowering the next generation of leaders. This year, we've got Sadie Robertson, we've got Darius Daniels, we've got Voo Worship, and trust me, there are so many other guests that are coming. Right now, quickly, go to VooCon.com to get registered, and I will see you in Miami in June. Let's get back to the combo.
Right? It's so good what you're saying. We have this little saying that we say sometimes, is it odd or is it God? But after hearing you, I might start going, is it God or is it Todd? Because it's ministering to me. But, I have known you for a long time. And even in the 15 years that I've known you, so much of your life has grown. So much of the weight that you're carrying, so much of your reach has been lengthened and your impact has been expanded. Yet, once again, from my perspective, and I'm gonna let you speak to this, it's like, I feel like you've always walked into the room light. You've walked into the room with a smile. To me, you and Julie both are easy, but you're very deep people and you're handling big things. And I think sometimes a great mark of a leader is like, they're able to walk with it with grace. You don't even know there's a storm swirling. They're just smiling right through it. But even as I'm hearing you kind of talk about it, like, nothing from my perspective would ever be like, oh, Todd Mullins deals with doubt. But that's what we're speaking to a little bit. I was thinking just a moment as you're talking, do you remember, I think our first year of VOO Church, we used to rent some like house up in Vero, some Airbnb.
Yes,
and it was
we
like
came up for
animal
a
house.
staff.
And you came like, I think we had people sleeping on the ground.
Yeah,
or
it
like
was
we had
crazy.
nothing.
Yes.
And you guys came and like taught. But like even then, like nothing, to me, I feel like that's been your heart and your posture.
Yeah.
What parts of that are disciplined? What parts of that are just your personality? What parts am I just seeing a glimpse of it? Because as long as I've known you, you've walked into it, whether it's a green room, a conference, a thing, whether you're listening to preaching or watching you preach, to me, you've been very, very consistent. Talk a little bit about my perspective of you and seeing that and going, man, I don't always feel that way. Or maybe go, I do feel that way. I've cultivated that.
Yeah. No, I don't always feel that way. I feel like, I think about David when he says, why so downcast, oh my soul, put your hope in God. He was talking to his soul. He was telling his soul what to do. I think too many times we let our soul and how we're feeling, the soulish side of us, dictate our emotions and our responses. And I've had to learn how to take control of that and not let that control me, not let my fears or my worries or my anxiety, or even walking into a room with Rich Wilkerson to control who I am, but instead go, no, God, you've graced me for what I'm called to do. You are with me. You're going to help me walk through what I got to walk through and be who I got to be. So I really, a lot of kind of preaching to myself. I talk to myself a lot. Like I was telling my church this past weekend, there's times I'll go walk and pray, and all I'm doing is just telling my soul what to think, reminding my soul of the scriptures, that, Psalm 62, that the Lord is my rock and he's my salvation. I will not be shaken. And I'm sure people look out their windows while I'm walking around my neighborhood, kind of preaching to myself, going, that guy is crazy. He's talking to himself. And I told our people, I said, I think you're crazy if you don't talk to yourself.
Yeah,
like you need to talk to your soul. You've got to take control of the script and the narrative. And so some of that is discipline. Some of that too, I think, Rich, I was talking to Julie about this because she would say, and most of the people in my church would say, that I have been given the gift of faith. So that's one of the gifts that we have, a gift of faith. And it's not hard for me to believe God for the supernatural. Never has been hard. And I'll tell our people at church when they come in, I'm like, man, you might be running low on your faith today, but if you're running low, I got enough for all of y'all. You can borrow some of my faith and we can pray for you. And I tell our team, you got to have enough faith for every person you pray with. You got to be prayed up so that faith, that you just start to speak and faith comes out of you and you are proclaiming and prophesying of what should be. But I started to realize, why did I write a book on doubt if I have the gift of faith? It must be that God gave me a gift in an area that he knew I would have lack. Why wouldn't the Holy Spirit give us spiritual gifts in the area where he knows that we're going to probably have a battle or two, we're going to lack, and we're going to need something. So he's going to, as a good father, make up for what's missing in our life. And so I believe the gift of faith was given to me because I think the Lord knew all my life I would be having to battle this doubt. So it's a combination of the gift of faith, it's a combination of discipline, of telling yourself what to, I had to write out personal daily declarations because there were times where I was just waking up and believing a false narrative. And it was kind of the first thing that was hitting my head, and so I was just like, you know what, I need, and actually I learned this from Julie, which I've learned all my good stuff from Julie. She's sharp. She's sharp, man. She came through 2020, 2021. It was a rough season for any of us that were leading anything. And she had to write down her daily declarations, leave them beside her bed every day so that when she woke up in the morning, she could just go, God, you're going to give me what I need today to walk through this day with grace and peace. You are the one that so just retraining. And some of those disciplines really help us take every thought captive instead of being held captive by every thought.
I love the thought, talk to yourself, don't listen to yourself.
Yeah.
So get out of your head.
Right.
And I think that's why affirmations and declarations, and not just, positive mantras, but the word of God.
Yeah. Yeah.
When
right.
And when you hear the word, the word will build faith in our life. And so I need more faith. And I think God's word is a massive key to that. It's really beautiful how you're saying that.
Probably my biggest crisis of faith, because it was easy for me growing up. My mom read me a Bible story. I was like, okay, then I understand it. And I'm going to, to believe God. Okay, this is what God says, so I believe it. And it probably wasn't until we had our son, Jefferson, and he went through some physical situations where, developmental delays, and at a very young age, he was diagnosed as on the autism spectrum, and my world got rocked. Like we were sitting there in that doctor's office after 7 years of infertility. You know how that feels. we finally had our baby, and then to get this diagnosis when he was about 2 years old, everything I believed, all the promises that I had just preached about, everything was there was this shaking on the inside of me. Like, can I hold on to it? Can I trust God even when the floor's falling out again? From what do I hold on to? And we went through some good years where he started to get his language back and things started to develop, and he was great. And we were just praying for words to go together, and like, God, would you just put 4 words together, 5 words together? And one day, Julie took him to the Gardens Mall, and the Disney store just opened up in the mall, and he loved Disney, and all the Disney stuff. And he ran up to the glass wall there with the display, and he said, "Look, Mom, Snow White and the 7 whores." And she was like terrified that her son had just said that word, screamed it across the Gardens Mall, but she was like, 8 words, that's 8 words. And we saw 8 words turn into 80 words, turn into, and God blessed him. And then when he turned 13, man, he regressed again. And we went through a season where right as we were stepping up to be the senior pastors, he stopped eating, he stopped sleeping. Doctors couldn't diagnose what was going on. He stopped speaking. There was just this big regression in his life. And I remember, God, what are we supposed to do now? Because surely you didn't bring us here to this place and then like leave us. What do we? And there were days he couldn't leave the house, weeks he couldn't leave the house. And one time we finally, I was playing out all the worst scenarios in my head, because he's an only child. And my parents are getting older. I'm like, what's going to happen? Like, is he ever going to be able to function on his own? I mean, what happens when we're gone? Like what? And I was playing out and speaking out all the worst case scenarios. And one day we went just to go outside and pray, went to the beach to walk. And we're walking on the beach. Jefferson's walking ahead of us with our dog. And this guy comes walking towards us with this T-shirt on. And I tell people, you shouldn't get your theology from a T-shirt on a beach in South Florida because that could be dangerous. But that day, God spoke to us through a T-shirt on a beach. And it said, listen to what you know, not to what you fear.
Very good.
Listen to what you know, not to what you fear. And immediately I knew I had been listening to my fears. I had been confessing my fears. That was all we were speaking, Julie and I, to each other. And instantly we realized, okay, we've got to just change the language in our household. And something shifted in us that day. We went back home and we went, no, we're not going to listen to our fears. We're going to listen to what we know. What we know is that Jefferson is wonderfully and fearfully made.
Amen.
What we know is he who began a good work in Jefferson is faithful to complete it. What we know is that God is a good, good father, and he has good plans for Jefferson. We put scriptures on sticky notes all around the house, refrigerator, mirrors. Man, that day, something shifted in the atmosphere in our home. Jefferson didn't get well immediately. I'd like to say, within a week or two, everything was good, but it was another 18 months of doctor's appointments and lots of prayer and fasting and shouting matches with God on the back porch. But God began to take us. We realized we're on this journey of miracles. God can do a miracle in a minute. He is a miracle working God. But sometimes he chooses to take you on a journey of little mini miracles. And if all you're looking for is that big miracle, like to solve the problem, make it go away, you're going to miss the little miracles along the way. And on the journey of miracles, on Jefferson's journey, more people have gotten in on his story than they would have if he had gotten healed when he was 2. Like if he had gotten healed at 2, we wouldn't be talking about anything. But now, after 20 some years of this journey of little mini miracles along the way, more people have gotten in on the journey. More people have celebrated with us and prayed with us and cried with us, and their faith has been strengthened because of Jefferson's faith. And by the way, he's doing great. Graduated from high school, college, plays worship music, leads worship bands, got married in 2020. So we're still on a journey. Like we're still there, but
my man got married.
There's so much to celebrate and thank God for along the way.
He's an amazing, amazing guy. And I know him. I like when you just said, back porch yelling with God. And I think sometimes we can complain about things, but fail to pray about things. And if we're just going to complain to each other, all we're going to get is pity from one another.
Yeah.
But if we'll complain to God, we can actually receive his power. So complaining to me is just when you talk about something with no solution towards it.
Yeah.
And we all are prone to do that at times. Hey, Todd, I'm going through this. And I think we need one another, but man, it's so much more powerful when I shift that upwards. And I think it's important for people to even hear a pastor like Todd Mullins say, like, God is not afraid of your anger, your doubt, your fear. In fact, I think he loves when we bring that to him. God, I'm upset right now. God, I'm scared right now. Talk about a couple of those moments, and as much as you're comfortable, but back porch yelling at God, what does that look like?
I had seasons of that, months where my prayer time was shouting matches with God on the back porch, because we were going through a season where the doctors couldn't tell us anything, and it felt like heaven was silent. And I'm like, God, I need something. I need to know that you care. I need to know that you're hearing my prayers. I need to know that my boy's going to be okay. I need anything. Give me anything. And it was like crickets, man. There was nothing coming back from God. And I had to still preach during this time. So I'm going to preach it on Sundays and then doubting everything on Mondays. And there were times I pulled back and I got frustrated. I'm like, well, fine. I'm not going to talk to you anymore. As if, giving God the silent treatment was going to do any good to anybody. And after about 2 weeks of that, I'm like, okay, there's only one place I can turn, and it's back to God. But I used to grow up thinking, man, the great men and women of the Bible, they probably just, had all this faith to trust God and do everything. But just, if you read your Bible at all, you see Moses complained and griped to God about what he was going through and had fears and doubts and insecurities. David wrote books in the Psalms about his God, why have you forsaken me? God, where are you? Why aren't you listening to me? I mean, over and over again, just getting real with God. And so I heard this somewhere. You take your doubts and you turn them to questions. You take your questions and you turn those into prayers, and you take those prayers and let that turn you to God. So it's okay that you got the doubts. It's okay that you got the fear. I mean, God wants you to be real. He wants you to your pain is either going to push you away from God or push you to God. Good. And we get to choose. And there were times where I've let my pain push me away because I was so frustrated that it went on longer than, man, come on, God, you can do this faster than you're doing it. But in those seasons, there's things he teaches us that we don't learn any other way. There's things that he speaks to us about when we're in our pain. I mean, it's like God shouts in our pain.
Amen.
He's got our full attention because we're like, God, we need you. We need something. And he's like, yeah, let me talk to you about this. And I'm a better person. I'm a better pastor. I'm a better husband. I'm a much better father because of this painful journey I've been on with Jefferson.
Amen.
It's softened my heart. It's made me more tender towards people. I think sometimes if you're a driven person, you're like, suck it up, let's go, go for a jog or eat a pizza, you'll be fine.
Yep.
But when you walk through places of brokenness with people and brokenness in your own life, it just tenderizes your soul to other people's brokenness.
I was sick for like the last 3 weeks, and the only beauty about being sick is the beauty of the appreciation of health.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, wait, that's what it feels like to be healthy. Yeah. Why have I wasted one day of my life not thanking God for great legs or wow, my ears work? And all it takes in life is for something to be taken away, for you to recognize what it is that you had. I think maturity is going, you know what? I'm right here in the present, and I don't have everything, but some things that I do have are really important. I'm one of 4 sons. I have an older brother, 2 younger brothers. The brother right beneath me, and his name is Graham. And when he was 6 months of age, he was misdiagnosed. This was in the 80s with spinal meningitis. And it actually ended up taking his life. It's a very dramatic, horrific story. Died on the doctor's table, coded in the hospital, went blue. And minutes, I think it's something like 10 minutes if I recall the story correctly, where he wasn't breathing. He was revived, brought back to life. But with it, every diagnosis was that Graham will never walk, talk, see, hear. He's going to be a vegetable. He's going to live, in a bed his whole entire life. Of course, that's not his story. Today he walks and he talks and he sees and he hears. In fact, he's part of our team here at VU. But he had significant brain damage and severe setbacks. And in many ways, he hasn't even experienced some of the great blessings that even Jefferson has stepped into. I think everyone that meets Graham meets another aspect of God for sure.
Absolutely.
But when I look back, and maybe this is easy for me to say as a brother, but honestly, some of my most maturing moments and some of my deepest revelations of God have come through my relationship with my brother Graham and living life with somebody who was disabled or who had a setback. I like this idea that we've got to stay around pain, especially us as pastors, because when I'm around pain or suffering, I'm going to see things that I normally wouldn't see. I'm going to hear things that I normally wouldn't hear, and I'm going to feel things that I normally wouldn't feel. You were kind of leaning towards it just now. What has been some of the blessing? And I'm really hoping that there's some people maybe that are even listening right now that maybe have pain in their home, a disabled child, a loss. And I think that we serve a God who redeems and restores and uses all of these things. What have been some of the greatest blessings of being the father of Jefferson, of what you have learned about God, yourself? You were kind of already leaning towards that.
Yeah. So much. I could talk for probably the next hour about the lessons I've learned from being Jefferson's dad and the beauty of understanding pain and suffering in a way that keeps us dependent and trusting on God. I feel like our tendency in nature, by nature, is to be independent, to be self-reliant, especially when you become a husband or a father. You've got to make it happen, and all of that spirit is the antithesis of what we're taught in the Word of God. We're told to stay dependent on God, to stay humble, to say, if it's the Lord's will, I mean, God, I'm going to trust you so much that I'm not taking charge. I'm letting you have charge. And by nature, I'm a take charge kind of guy. I'm a fix the problem kind of guy. I like to solve it. I've always, I looked at people that couldn't come up with a plan for their life and go, what is your problem? Like, I got a plan for your life. And I don't even know you, and I could help you. And that spirit, or whatever that attitude is, that's been broken in me by loving someone who didn't know how to get out of bed, by loving someone that didn't know what the next step was supposed to be for their day, much less their life. And it slowed me down in a way to have greater understanding, greater compassion. I used to think I was a compassionate, kind person, but as I've been on this journey, God showed me all the places where I was not displaying the kindness of God or the compassion of the Father towards people. It's changed the way I pastor my team. It's changed the way I love the people in our church. It's made me slow down. One of the things with Jefferson is he said when he was little, I had to sit and talk with him slowly so that he could understand where I was going. Now I can talk fast with him, but before I had to really slow down and make sure he was following me. It's caused me to slow down with people and appreciate where someone else might be that's different than where I am. It's humbled me. It's kept me dependent on the Spirit of God. And so God will take all things and turn it for good. We have to be willing, though, to look for the good that may be different than the good we wanted. I had a different plan for Jefferson's life. I had a different thought of what it would look like, right? But God knows exactly what he's doing. We have to trust him. And I think the hardest thing is to trust him in the dark times, to trust him in the dark, what he showed you in the light. We'll forget in the dark what he showed us in the light. And there were things God showed me earlier in Jefferson's life that I forgot when I was going through the valley and going through those dark times. And it's taken me time to go back and pull them back up and remember, oh God, no, you gave me this promise. You gave me this word. I'm going to hold on to this no matter what I face.
Our faith suffers when we forget, and all of us. I mean, we go through. I'm in Numbers right now in my soap journal. It's just like, it's funny because you read a chapter and it's actually sometimes it's years, but you're like, guys, you just learned this in the last chapter. But we're the same way. God can give us a promise, and we can find ourselves in a storm. Where are you? You're asleep. Don't you care if we drown? Yeah, and that happens to us. The Apostle Paul, he writes and says, 3 times I asked for the Lord to remove this thorn in my flesh. We don't know what that thorn is, but I think it's good that we don't know, because if we did know, we'd probably compare our thorn to his thorn, and either we'd find ourselves inferior or superior. The whole point is that there's something in my life that I'm asking for you to remove that's painful, that's hurtful. I feel like if you could remove this thorn, I could be more useful to you, God. And that's really the prayer, is he's praying, God, if you would take this away, I know now I could really be effective. Yeah. And how does God answer the prayer? God says, hey, I'm going to answer your prayer by not meeting your request.
Right.
Instead, he says, my grace is sufficient for you. For my power is made perfect in weakness. Yeah. This is the upside down world that we are living in. This is why we gather weekends. This is why we build buildings, is to recalibrate and to reorient ourselves with the gospel and the good news. Yeah. A grace that is sufficient, a grace that is adequate for our purpose, a grace that is just the right amount for our race. And even the idea of a thorn. A thorn on a rose bush, why is there a thorn? It's because the rose is so beautiful that the thorn is to keep a predator away. Yeah. And I think all of us, I'm not saying Jefferson in this case, but there's different things in our life. Yeah. I think God, he puts a thorn in our flesh because it prevents the predator of pride from stepping in. And anytime we think that we've got it on our own, independent, it's when we stop being dependent on him. And I think what he desires mostly is that we would be desperate. I think every storm and every place of suffering in my life is always hopefully, unless I'm trying to.
Yeah.
I've been out there a couple times in those hurricanes. Like, I got this.
I got it.
I've got a 6-pack. Well, bro, a 6-pack and running a marathon doesn't stop. A class 5 hurricane. It's going to take you out, bro. There's been times I've tried to will through it, but ultimately, I think that storm, it removes the pride and goes, God, I can't. It reminds me of the disciples like rowing on the. It's like Scripture says, I don't know if it's in Mark 4 or 5, where it's like they're rowing with all their might and they're straining at the oars.
Right.
Like I'm straining and I can't get to the other side, and that's what pain, suffering, storms, challenges, thorns in our flesh do. It's like, it makes you desperate for God, and there's something about God that He loves us being desperate for Him.
Yes.
Numbers now, manna. Like you don't get to take some for tomorrow. You got to eat your daily bread. That's Jesus' prayer.
That's right.
Daily bread.
I think one of the biggest things that God, I know, has worked on my life is that independence, self-dependence piece.
Yeah.
So that we stay trusting in God, and it keeps us daily dependent on Him, daily trusting in Him. And again, that's what the difference between a miracle in a minute and a journey of miracles does. Miracle in a minute, you're done. You're back onto life. You've almost forgotten the pain you went through. But when you're on a journey and you're depending today for the next miracle, the next provision, the next strength, God, give me this strength. Help me to understand how to love my spouse this way, or love my child this way, or work through this financial situation, whatever it is. Every day it keeps you dependent. You're going to see God provide. You're going to see God speak. You're going to hear Him speak. You're going to know how to move. And man, you're going to get better, because something you do every day, man, you do that every day, for year upon year, your faith is going to grow. Your wisdom of God, wisdom of what He's saying to you, learning to hear His voice, it's all going to get better. So fast forward 5 years from now, you're going to know the voice of God better. You're going to know the Word of God better. Your faith is going to be stronger because you had to exercise that faith muscle every day, not just back years ago.
I have little kids in the house, a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, 3-year-old, and a brand new little baby. And, of course, my job is to teach them, but they are teaching me all the time. And there's something about that childlike faith. And one part of that childlike faith is that they're just present. Yeah. They're not thinking about 3 weeks from now. No. They're not planned out in the future. They are right here, right now. The craft that they're doing, fully engage. They have to they won't go to bed unless I tell them to go to bed, And I think there's something about all of us that you're talking about, that miracle by the minute. Like God is working, and the more and more dependent we are upon Him, the more and more we get to hear His voice, and that's where faith emerges. This book, Don't Let Doubt Take You Out. I think it's a message that everybody needs to hear. At this point, here you are, and I know I keep kind of setting it up this way, like quit doing this, but I just think that people sometimes, the size of your ministry and whatnot, it's like you can almost become a caricature. Like, oh, that's Pastor Todd Mullins. He doesn't have doubt. He teaches us how to have faith all the time. Yeah. And I love what we do. I know you love what you do. I think we have the greatest jobs in the world. Absolutely. I'm not looking for pity or sympathy, but maybe if we can for a moment to pull the curtain back.
Let's do it.
What does, and I don't like this kind of terminology, but this is what they would say about you. You're a mega church pastor, super successful. You're in West Palm Beach. What are the fears that hit Todd Mullins today? Like you've seen God move. What is the pressure that you're comfortable, like that they wouldn't, I'm not looking for people to come, but like.
Let me flip it on you.
Okay.
You're in Miami. You've got all these campuses, all these people. You've got an international platform, Rich. What are the fears that you, because we look at you in DC and we're like, oh my gosh, this young couple, I wish at their age I had it going on like they had it going on. What are some of the fears that you're struggling with?
I think
doubts.
I think probably the overarching fear, and maybe it's similar to other people, but I think at 40 years of age, when you set it up that way, I think the first fear is just to last. You could put that into a big other subcategories. Right. Why wouldn't you last?
To finish well.
Yeah, to finish well. I mean, I think there's so many case studies around us, and that's always being fed to you about people falling apart. I think the fear of not being good enough, staying sharp, it kind of comes back to what we're talking about, which is we have to be reminded with good friends and God's word, like this is not on you, but I preached on Sunday and it's like, oh, wow. A lot of times on Sunday nights, I find myself hanging out with people pretty late at night. And I've kind of, even through therapy, like discovered it's like, oh, it's because for me as a pastor, it's like I've worked all week at bringing this thing that doesn't just feel like a lesson. It feels like my life and I'm sharing it.
Yeah.
And it's like melting ice. This Sunday's going to be over. I'm going to step back into the office Monday and it's going to be like a figment of our a memory that many people will never even talk about again, but it'll still somehow be a part of me. So it's almost like this elongated celebration, like don't let the night end because that was, and I got to do it again. And so this like the doing it again, the stamina, I think the financial pressure.
Yeah, it's real.
It is a real thing. And it's funny, I feel like our church has grown tremendously and my personal needs are met. It's not about me. It's more about the vision that God's placed us and maintaining and stewarding. How do we cultivate that? And I don't want to ever preach to get people to get, you're just going, God, you got to do it. But that can loom and that can be there. The team, the staff, like, is that person okay? Like, I'm trusting, like, I think there's this idea of, as you grow, of empowerment and you're trusting the Spirit of God at work in people. When I first, started in youth ministry, it's like, I'm going to disciple you. And you grab them by the shoulders, and like you learn even in that moment, it's like, you can't disciple someone who doesn't want to be discipled.
Right.
And I've also learned you can't stop someone from being discipled who wants to be discipled. But I have to keep learning that lesson. Like, it's like, oh, that guy on the team, like, are they okay? How's their marriage? And then the fear of like, if they're making some mistake, that can affect all of us and the control side of it. I mean, I don't know. Like,
those are some of the same fears. So like, I'm years ahead of you.
Yeah.
Same fears. Like my dad always said, my biggest fear is I just don't want to screw this thing up. I don't want to mess it up. I don't want to get me in the middle of what God's doing. I don't want to touch what the Lord is doing. And so I think that's a holy fear. That's a good fear. So some fears are good, right? That's a good thing that keeps you, God, it's yours. It's holy. I don't want to touch it. I think that most people would not think that pastors that are out there just, killing it and doing great and building big things would have this like, am I good enough? Am I staying fresh enough? And some of that's good because you want to stay fresh. You want to stay in the Word. You want to stay growing as a leader. If you stop growing, the whole team stops growing. So some of that is healthy. Like there's healthy fears, healthy doubts. The fears of snakes. That's a good thing. I'm going to run when I see something move, right? So some things when they get out of control, they get unhealthy. And so some of that is good. But then when it comes over to the side of comparison, or man, I can't preach like that, or my church isn't like that, or I don't know if I have the ability to raise leaders up the way this guy does or this girl does, that's an unhealthy comparison game. And I always say in the comparison game, nobody wins. I mean, that's a game people play and nobody wins. So you got to figure out how do I pull the good out of that to challenge me to keep growing, but not where it's going to make me feel inferior. And so I think that's something that I feel like almost every week when I go out to preach, I'm like, God, is this even worth, like, I think this is what you're asking me to deliver, but is this even going to land? Is this going to make sense? And so there's this thing of, man, somebody else could do this better than me. And so I think those are some of the fears that I still, even at this stage, worry about and think about, and the doubts.
Well, I think it's helpful to hear just because I think when we pull the curtain back a little bit, I mean, Elijah was a man just like us.
Yeah. Right.
And it's funny, we can read our Bible and go, man, I'm nothing like this, but the scriptures just go, these were just regular people.
Yeah.
And I think even today, where it gets dangerous, and we know this happens, is like being put up on a pedestal that is not right, where it creates this superiority kind of complex, or I'm spiritually superior to you. No, I'm chasing after Jesus. I feel like God appoints leaders and we build his church together. Yeah. And I don't think I'm more important than you. I think I am a man of God. I want to walk my life in integrity, but we are frail human beings, and the same temptations, fears, worries that hits those in the congregation hits us at times. Yeah. And if we don't get an opportunity to have an outlet ever and even discuss that, it's like sometimes you can't dismantle the fear. And I think even like, as you say that to me, I could just go into pastor mode and go, Todd, are you crazy, bro? You got tens of thousands of people think that you're doing a pretty good job. They want to come hear you speak. And I think when you walk into a room, like I just said, I feel like you bring instant encouragement. I feel like, to me, from my perception, a picture of security. You and Julie both running in your own lane. You guys are the greatest. I've been at so many things that maybe I was speaking at, and if I get off the stage, and even if it was bad, honestly, like I've had bad messages in front of you, Rich, that was amazing. Like you're so quick to affirm. And the culture of Christ Fellowship when I'm there, I mean, it bleeds everywhere. And I appreciate you even sharing some of that stuff, because I think it's good for people to hear.
I think when you hear that other people that you look up to, or maybe as a spiritual leader in your life, and they are struggling with fears and doubts and insecurities just like you, it makes you go, oh, okay. That's part of the reason why I wrote the book, is I wanted our congregation, I wanted people to know, even I deal with self-doubt, I deal with doubting God, and I deal with doubting people and doubting others. And when they hurt me, and I have a tendency to pull back, but all of that can take me out. It takes me out of the relationship game if I start pulling back from people. It takes me out of the God game if I start, questioning God. Why didn't this work out the way, I push back from God? Or it takes me out from being who God's created me to be. And here's, how do we fight that? How do we turn that? So we actually leverage it to have deeper faith, have deeper relationships, and we step out with a deep confidence of what's on our life for God.
Last night I was at a friend's office, and it was sort of this little private kind of listening concert by a guy by the name of John Foreman, who's the front man for a band called Switchfoot that I was a huge fan of.
Yeah.
And John's kind of doing a little tour just of his own sort of original music. It's really great singer-songwriter stuff. And one of the things I was so impressed about last night, I was 40 of us up in an office, and this wasn't even his tour stop. I think he's playing tonight in Boca or something up kind of near you guys, was to watch this guy who has given decades towards songwriting and playing in front of arenas and all sorts of different crowds, how excited, how joyful, how much I believed he was enjoying his night as much as I was enjoying my night. This is my one night with John Foreman. He does this for decades every night. But there was something so, I was so drawn to someone who's that passionate and who loved it that much. I think one of the sort of unspoken things that happens sometimes in ministry, I mean, you're 40 plus years at Christ Fellowship, your family. The fact that you're here today, driving down to Miami, building buildings, walking into rooms with a sweet spirit. Today you walked in, you're saying hi to everybody. There's a lot of collateral pain of people and betrayal, and that guy started, he's gone, or that person promised me this. And I think one of the difficult things about being a pastor is just, the relational turnover. I saw some TikTok maybe 2 years ago that like the average person has 7 major relationship transitions in their lifetime. The average pastor has that every year. I don't know if these stats are true, but it
feels like that.
Sure feels like that. And talk about that, because people disappoint us. How have you, I'm kind of comparing you to John Foreman right now, shout out, dare you to move. But like in the same way, I'm kind of watching two different total, paths, but the same kind of spirit of going, man, I love what I'm doing.
Love what I'm doing.
I'm excited about what I'm doing, but I've been doing it for a long time, and I've watched people come and go. People let me down. Maybe talk about some of the people pain and all that. And how you
people pain is real, and you're going to be hurt by people because nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. So I'm sure that I've hurt people because I didn't mean to. But if you go into it thinking you're going to be insulated from people pain, then you're going to insulate yourself from people, and you're going to actually let fear and doubt and the anxiety of that keep you out from being, in deep relationships, which we're wired for. We're made by a relational God, God Father, God Son, God Holy Spirit, in constant relationship with each other. We've been made for relationship. When God made Adam and Eve, it was for relationship. Jesus came to reestablish it. It's all about relationship. So wouldn't the enemy attack in a place that you've actually been created to find life and purpose and meaning of life in your relationships? Of course he is. He's going to attack in the relationship with God, but he's also going to attack in this relationship between people in your life. And so, I think if people pain is real, we've all been hurt and disappointed. And what I discovered was that doubt plays a role in that too, because you start doubting, when you're hurt by somebody, you doubt their motives, you doubt their intent. Why did they say that? Why did they treat me that way? Why didn't they include me? Why didn't they invite me? What's going on? And I have built so many crazy narratives in my brain about what is behind their motives, like second guessing. And sometimes when I finally get up the nerve to go talk to them, I'm like, I share something like, well, no, that's not what I meant at all. And it's solved. But up until that conversation, there's all this questioning and doubt going on. And then if you give that doubt a seat at the table, man, it's just going to build a gap between you and the other person. And I realized that's happened in some of my relationships where I let doubt last too long in the relationship, where they were probably doubting some of my decisions. I was doubting some of the things they were doing, and the gap just grew and grew, and it took out the relationship. And as much as I've tried to build that back, man, there's some relationships where when doubt is it's like the leading voice in the questioning people and their motives, it's hard to build it back. So I guess what I've had to do is, what I've learned from that is, man, when doubt starts to creep in, identify it for what it is. Go to the other person, have the awkward conversation. Julie and I say that the only conversations we regret are the ones we never had, or the ones that we put off too long having.
Very good.
We waited too long to actually have the conversation. And so, I just try to go, hey, I'm not good at this, but I need to have a conversation. So, show me some grace as we dive into this, and then begin talking about the problem. And most of the time, Rich, the problem's not even the thing I'm talking about. It's not even the problem. We get to what it really is, and it wasn't that big of a deal, but the enemy had stirred it up. And when I went through really some disappointment of people that had let me down, that were really close, I built walls up. I started to just go up, man, if I've been hurt by them, I don't want to be hurt like that again. And they weren't walls tall enough to keep everybody all the way out, but walls enough to keep everybody back.
Yeah.
But what it was doing was leading to isolation and like loneliness. And I started to feel this depression that I'm like, some people are the glass is half empty, some are the glass is half full. I'm like, the glass is overflowing in Jesus' name.
Yep.
And I went through a season where like I was dealing with a sadness because of loss of friendship. And I didn't know what to do with it. And all I did was just push people back. And I realized that I needed to open up and confide in some people what I was going through. And so people was what got me in this place, people pain, but people was what's going to get me out of this place. And so I actually had to open up to people and go, hey, help me figure this out. And it was the relationships that actually helped me get out of the people pain I was going through.
In church life and in leadership life, there's always this triangle where it's like you and I have a relationship, and then we both have a relationship with this guy. But then, I offend you or I do something disrespectful to you, but now this guy doesn't know what to do. Like, is he supposed to be offended for you? And I think one of the big lessons that I had is that where I had a lot of pain with people wasn't always directly with me. It was when I was working for my dad, and I saw how people treated my dad. And I would get so upset. I would get so offended. I'm like, don't mess with my dad. How dare you, And then I would go talk to my dad about this. And my dad was like, Rich, let it go.
Yeah.
We're fine.
I think we have the same father.
Yeah, forgive him. We'll see him in heaven, hopefully, And I think that it taught me quickly, it's like, don't be offended for people who aren't offended. Don't fight battles that people themselves are not even trying to fight.
Good.
And we have to recognize in the triangle of leadership, if you offend me and we have our own issue, we have a third party friend, I want to be the type of leader that's like, hey, this is between me and Todd. This is not between, and I think sometimes we end up icing even more people that had nothing to do with it. Now, I'm mad at your friend because I'm mad at you. And I think our world just gets smaller.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the scripture says the world of the generous gets larger. And I think oftentimes we just equate that to money, which it certainly has a great application, but generosity is more than our money.
Right.
Generosity is giving more than what's required in whatever category that is. And I want to live in a big world. That doesn't mean a bigger house or a bigger car. Not opposed to those things, but that's not what I'm after. I'm after big relationships.
Right.
I'm after big God opportunities that we can make massive impact. And I don't want to live in a small world by going, hey, you and this guy have an issue. Now I have to limit my relationship with you because of him. I just think that's not wise. And you just said it brilliantly. It's like the people that hurt us, well, it's going to take people to heal you.
Yeah. And we got to be careful when we're going through people pain not to talk about it with other people.
Yeah.
Like we'll even encourage like people on our team, hey, if you're dealing with something going on at work or with somebody in the church, if you go home and talk to your spouse about it, then, which is natural, but you unload and you're frustrated. Well, 2 or 3 days later, you resolve it, but your spouse still is upset at them for that. And you forgot to circle back around and they're holding on to hurt and resentment. I can't believe you talked to my husband that way or whatever, So there's a gap that's created. Usually the gap's created when there's a gap between your expectations and reality. And if you put a lot of people in the gap, like, because you've talked to people about it, and that gap gets wide and it closed the gap, you got to have a lot of conversations. So we just tell people, listen, when there's a gap, what you do in the gap matters. Mind the gap. Be careful with the gap, because you got to be, if you put a lot of people in there and get a lot of people involved, it's going to take longer to close that gap up.
For all the pastors listening right now, this is the church genius side of Todd Mullins, that don't let that go over your head, because that's a big deal, especially on church staffs. And it's like, we're working every day together.
Yeah, there's a lot of
friction,
frustration.
But your spouse has never seen that person. They lay down on the pillow like, this guy wore me out. And then you forget to even tell your spouse, hey, by the way, no, we're totally good. We saw each other yesterday, we had coffee. I think that's a lot of wisdom, because
we tell our team, if you're talking about something, if you're not the problem, part of the problem or part of the solution, and you're talking about it, it's gossip.
Good.
So right there, if you're not a part of the problem or part of the solution, why are you even talking about it? So just don't, and try to limit that.
I'm going to use that.
And the hardest part is when you carry that home, because you're thinking, well, I got to talk to somebody about it, so I'm going to talk to my spouse about it. But man, you just drag them through the mud. Julie and I even are very, very careful about how we talk about any problems with people. In leadership, you got to talk about people and you got to talk about problems with people, but how you talk about it. Julie always says, I try to talk about it with an empty chair in the room as if they're sitting in the room.
Wow.
That if they were in a healthy place and they actually heard us talking about it, they may not be in a healthy place, but if they heard the way we were talking, they would know that they were loved and cared for, even though we have to talk about it. So that's just one of the little tools we try to keep in the back of our mind.
No, that's wisdom. I think we should also add, it's gossip if you do it on a podcast. Because that's the new thing. It's like, hey,
let's just sit here and
Todd,
talk
we never
about
talked
people.
about this person privately to them, but you know what? This is a good space right now on the podcast.
Yeah.
This is what
Thousands
this person
of people.
did. It's wild, some of the stuff I see. We're coming around the end here, but I'm just realizing, like, your greatest partner and the greatest gift to you outside of Jesus and your calling is Julie. I've been married for 18 years. You've been married for
38 years. We met in 7th grade in church youth group, and we started dating right away, on and off, all through middle school, high school, got married, got engaged when I was 18, married when I was 20.
She's a weapon.
She is amazing. She's a great leader. Great.
What are some of your thoughts in terms of just marrying well and keeping that going? I know we could be for you for another hour, but I just think it's a big part of growing and maturity. It's a big part of your story, because you guys don't just kind of like, you guys lead together in a really, really beautiful way. And when I say that, that doesn't mean that she just shows up on a Sunday and stands by you.
Right.
She's an operator. She's a preacher. She's a cultivator and a developer. Like, she's
way better
leader.
than me at any of that.
I mean, she's a freak leader.
So she leads our team. Like, we have a team of about over 400 staff, and she leads the systems of that and the process of that and the culture of that and the heart behind that. And she just does it brilliantly. Like, she'll bring things up. Hey, we need to be thinking about this for the team in 6 months, and here's how we're going to get there. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even know we needed to think about that, right? So thank God, he knew what I needed back in 7th grade. But I think what really works is you've got to champion the other person's calling.
Great.
And she's always championed my calling and what I was called to, and I have always championed her calling. And I feel like as husbands, maybe a little more weight's on us, because sometimes we think, oh, we've got to be the leader, or we've got to do this. And there is some things that we've got to lead on and take responsibility for. I'm not saying that, but I think one of the greatest ways we lead is how we open doors that we're created to open for our wives to walk through. And there's doors that only we can open for them, that they can try to open up themselves and try to force something open, but God has sovereignly put us there to open the door, to hold the door for our wives.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
You ever have a big fight with her in front of the team as you're in a meeting?
No, not in front of the team. We've had our disagreements and arguments, but we try not to let the sun go down, man. We will stay up late working through it. And even if we have to put a pin in it and go, you know what? Okay, here's where we are right now, and we'll pick this up tomorrow. But at least we know we're on the same team. We know we're working together for.
DC and I got together when we were 17. Went to college together. We had the same major. We were in the same fraternity and sorority. I mean, we've just been buddies,
best friends.
Best friends.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's a big point there to cultivate a friendship. But we've just done everything together since we were teenagers. And I mean, she is a real Christian. I'm still on the journey. But we've had some meetings before where I've had to apologize to everyone.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And hey, I'm so sorry for me and Dawn Shree are good. That was me. You know, like it's embarrassing. But like I think it's a small price to pay in terms of the payoff that's so worth it working with her. And I don't think that's for everyone, you know, to be in that kind of partnership. That's just been our story.
Well, she's a great leader. You would be crazy not.
Well, yeah. I'd be arrested.
I mean, you'd be arrested and the place would shut down. Food would shut down.
Yeah, it would shut down. I would have never gotten here, that's for sure.
Right.
Without her. But no, she's a fantastic leader. And I think a big part of what she does at VU is the heart side of it and is the pastoral side and always keeping us back on mission. And I'm so thankful for her. Yeah. But she knows every one of my strengths, but she knows all of my weaknesses. And so sometimes we can be in a meeting, it's like, DC, come on now, you know?
Don't bring that up.
Yeah,
right
totally. We're growing, but we need to get around you guys more and more. I can't believe you've been married for 38 years.
Yeah. This year we'll be 38. Yeah.
That's
got married at 20.
Crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. 18. How do you feel about 18? Would you remember when you were married at 18? Or
well, I remember when Julie we were 16 and she brought up something about being married. She would say she didn't, but I remember the conversation and it freaked me out. I'm like, I am 16. Let's not talk about marriage right now. But 2 years later, I was buying a ring and we weren't even dating when I bought a ring. We were in one of our off seasons and I was home from college and I'm like, I love her. Like, why would I not? So without talking to her, I went and bought a ring at this diamond ring.
Where'd you go?
It was a diamond
Zales?
chip. It was a chip. You had to
diamond
kind of
chip,
look at it for it. And I took her out to dinner and I said, let's go to dinner. And we went to dinner. At the end of the night, I got down on one knee. And I always say that if a guy builds up the courage to get a ring, get down on one knee and ask you that question, will you marry him? Ladies, you need to be very, very confident about what you're going to say. Like you need to think through what you're going to say because the first words I heard were, no way. Are you kidding me? You've got to be kidding. Those were like that. I'm like, is this like no way? Or like OMG, no way? Because I need to know which way it's going. Right? And she kissed me and, but we weren't dating. So no wonder I shocked her. We were in a very extended 18-month off season. We hadn't dated for 18 months.
I don't even understand that, Todd.
I just came home.
The elders came around and said, you guys need a separation
I
of
was
your
away
courtship?
to college. Yeah. I went away to college. She was faithful all through her freshman year at college. I was still in high school. And then when I went off to college, I thought we needed to release each other to seek the will of God.
Yeah, I hear you.
And so she was like, oh, okay, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so after 18 months of being away at college, I came home for an extended break and we were hanging out every day. And I'm like, I love this girl. Like I've loved her since 7th grade and I need to put a ring on that finger before I go back to school.
Oh my God.
So I went for it. She said yes and we're still together, so.
That's wild. That's wild.
She had to break up with somebody else before she could officially
Stop.
Somebody that she was in an on again, off again relationship with at her college, but it was all good, you know. Yeah.
So before you say yes, go break up with your boyfriend.
Yes. A full yes.
My gosh. That is crazy.
Yeah, a little racy. As racy as it gets.
And had you asked her folks, or do you guys do that? You didn't do that back then?
No, we didn't do that back then. Back in those days, I don't know. I was scared. I'm impulsive. I'm a 7 on the Enneagram, so I'm like, let me buy a ring and just ask her.
Did your dad know you were doing it?
Yeah, my parents. I prayed with my parents before. Got their blessing.
My goodness. I was so afraid to I had dated Audrey forever, but I was so
her
afraid.
dad is like, man, coach.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you would want him to get his blessing.
He's a scary man.
I know, right?
What do you think about, like, do you have any opinion on this? What do you think about getting married young? Are you for that?
I am for that.
Yeah, me too.
I think it worked out so good.
Me too.
I didn't have to go on the dating scene or the whatever scene to try to no swiping. I was just like,
me too.
It was a blessing. So I feel like it's a blessing.
I do too.
Yeah.
And I think that I just think about life. Like the longer you go single, the more you get comfortable with being single. Mm-hmm. And getting married, there is a death of an old life. Yeah. And there's a resurrection of the two become one. And
it rubs off some of the edges that you get. And I mean, I think in marriage, it's a sanctification process because you get to know the other person so well and they know you so well. And man, if you have that open relationship to speak into those places where the Lord wants to change, then it changes you.
We could do a whole nother podcast on this because I think it's a really.
We got to have DC and Julie here though for that podcast.
Yes, we will.
We should not do that without them.
We'll
get in trouble.
This is why you are a much better leader than I am. What's an area right now in your life you're leading at such a high level? You've got this new book out personally, as well as just all the impact that you guys are making in South Florida, across the nation. But still, we're always growing and becoming something. What's an area right now you're going, God, I need to mature in this, or God, I'm immature in this, which is sort of maybe the negative way of saying it, but it's sometimes fun to look at it that way. Yeah. Is there something that you can kind of pinpoint?
I think there's always a challenge in leaders to keep developing leaders and keep growing other people up, and that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot. Like, you can have a class and you can teach a lesson on it, but man, when you actually do life on life with people and you're trying to raise up leaders, you've got to invest in that, and you've got to stay. And sometimes I think we can think, oh, I've done that. I've already raised up a bunch of leaders. They need to raise up. But I think as a leader, you're constantly pouring out to other people. You're trying to raise their level of leadership. And at times that can get tiring, and I found myself trying to pull back from that. And when I pull back from it, I feel like the Lord's saying, no, Todd, you got to keep giving yourself to the next generation. You got to keep giving yourself to the upcoming leaders. They still need what you have. So don't hold back, don't pull back, don't slow down. Keep giving, keep investing. And it's the best investment you can give, because it's going to outlast any of us.
So much of leadership is like, I know what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
I just don't always have the energy or the
slow
desire.
down. Don't slow down, man. Keep going.
You can't. We're so grateful that you take some time with us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Todd Mullins, everybody. He's got a brand new book out. It's called Don't Let Doubt Take You Out. I encourage you, get it. If you're ever in the South Florida area, honestly, 14 different locations. If you're in Dade County going on a cruise, you got to go to VU. But make sure you make your way up north, because these are great friends of ours. We love them so much. And Todd and Julie are just the best. And so we love you. Praying for you guys always. Thank you for being great leaders in our lives. And we're always cheering you guys on. Go check him out. Guys, if you're still with us, an hour and 22 minutes in, leave us a comment, ask us some questions. We want to make sure, even as we're coming into the off month of Mature Me, that we're still resourcing you guys with great leadership content. Feedback is so helpful to us. So we love you guys, and stay right here, because next week there's always a brand new pod coming out. We love you guys.